Welcome to our quarterly Govern Stage Strategy Review. We've had a number of changes since the last time we met. Most notably, we've added the authentication and authorization group and the anti-abuse group. And then we also reorganized ourselves to split authentication and authorization into two separate groups. Our new organizational structure within Govern looks like this. If you have any questions about any of the features specific to these groups, these would be the PMs to reach out to. I want to take just a minute and touch on the new authorization group that we just created, because it used to be that we had authentication and authorization was combined under one engineering team. We originally had within that team roughly one engineer per milestone on average was working on our authorization capabilities, most specifically our custom roles. And we were hearing just a lot of customer interest and demand, and we were seeing a lot of impact for our revenue in the upcoming roadmap related to custom roles. And so the progress that we were making there needed to be right-sized based off of the demand that we were hearing. So we decided to split out the authentication and authorization group into two separate groups. We've initially staffed up this new team with one EM, one PM, one front-end engineer, and three back-end engineers, just focusing exclusively on authorization. Authentication is really focused on getting users logged into GitLab, making sure that their identity is verified, that they are who they say they are. And then authorization focuses on making sure that users have the correct permissions to perform the actions that they need to do within GitLab. That means governing what resources and what objects they have access to after they're logged in. So just for a real high level of the roadmap and the feature scope of this new authorization group, right now the current focus is all on improving custom roles. So the focus is going to be adding more custom permissions and improving some of the auditing and reporting and management capabilities. Longer term, that group is going to own all of the features related to permissions. There's a list there. That long-term direction is going to be set over the next several months as we get that group ramped up. We definitely do have a really good, solid long-term roadmap for this group going forward. There's a lot of work to be done there. Taking a step back across the govern stage, I just want to speak for a minute to the different target personas that we're covering. With bringing over authentication and authorization and anti-abuse, we've added the system administrator persona to the list of personas that are covered by the govern stage. The common thread across all of these different personas is that they all share a common responsibility of security and governance. And so that's a common thread that we're trying to address, is to make sure that all of these different personas have the tools that they need to apply proper governance to GitLab, and where possible that we facilitate collaboration between the different personas whenever that's needed. Because we are a single DevSecOps platform, we have an opportunity to bring these groups together into one place and make it possible for them to work easily together, as opposed to having them work in separate siloed tools. Some of the themes that we have across the govern stage include top-down security controls, making sure that we have no compromises with compliance, coordinating governance across GitLab, emphasizing usability and convention over configuration, and lastly, securing the software supply chain. So that being said, we're going to dive into our roadmap for each of the different groups. Because we are covering roadmap, I'll note that this presentation and its linked pages have information that is subject to change, so please do not rely on this information for planning or purchasing purposes. And with that, I'll hand it over to Hannah for authentication.
All right. So I'm Hannah Suter, product manager for authentication and acting PM for authorization group. So I'll go ahead and cover both. Recently released on the authentication front, we did our enterprise users automated claims. This is an important feature for our SaaS customers. It is a SaaS only feature. What this is trying to do is really closing some of the user management gaps. Our self-managed users have a bit more control over the users in their instance. We want to extend some of that same control to our SaaS product. And the way that we can have group owners exert that control is by a concept called enterprise user. What this is to claim enterprise users, you would set up a verified domain, proving that you own a domain. Once the domain is verified, we have a job that runs, and any user that has their email address, the primary email address that matches a verified domain, they're automatically marked as an enterprise user. What this does is gives the group owner of that group the ability to have a lot more control over the user, and also to self-service some of the things that today those users might have to go to GitLab support for. So we're excited about this feature, and it's being rolled out, and anytime a new verified domain is added, we will have a job that runs automatically. So it's not something that you need to manually opt into or anything like that. We also released service accounts. This is a really important feature, but it's API only, so I didn't have a good screenshot here. But service accounts, think of it as a replacement for your project and group access tokens. Those tokens are tied to users. So if you have an automation that's integrated with a project access token and that user leaves, you lose your automation and have to set it up all over again. And then it's also tied to that user who consumes a seat. Service accounts are not tied to individual users, and they also don't consume a seat. Another good thing about them is that they are more granular. You have to manually add them to individual groups and projects. So for example, a group access token obeys inheritance. It sometimes can have a much wider radius in terms of what that group access token can access, and a service account is more granular. Also, we enforced lifetime limits on tokens, including project and group access tokens. You have to extend the expiration or rotate them a minimum of 1 time per year. And we are providing an opt-out with service accounts to alleviate that burden of having to do that, although we do remind everyone that long-lived credentials are not the best security practice. Coming up, we're working on an integration with GitLab and GCP. Our team touches all of the authentication piece, the user account pieces. We allow you to link your accounts across GCP and GitLab. And the idea kind of behind the project is that it really allows you to not have to work separately in GitLab for your source code and then over to your GCP for deployment. You can instead work in the same tool and access the benefits and features of both platforms. So our team has a heavy hand in this. We're using a technology called Workload Identity Federation, which is really secure and does not use service accounts or tokens. So we feel good about our authentication architecture for this. We're looking towards the future with passwordless authentication, which is all the rage because it has so many wonderful benefits. I feel like often security comes at the expense of ease of use. And I think that's not the case at all with passkeys, which is cool because they are more secure and they're also easier to use. So instead of logging into GitLab with a password, you can, or you will be able to log in with your fingerprint or your face scan or a YubiKey. Today, we support those things for second factor only. So you still have to use a username and password pair as your first factor, but we're looking to take passwordless to our primary login experience in the future. Okay, next up, I'll talk about authorization. As Sam mentioned, authorization for the moment is really focused on custom roles. So that's going to be everything I talk about here. We recently released a UI that allows you to define a custom role. It has to be based on a GitLab base role, and then you can add granular permissions, of which we're adding to all the time, to that role to make a custom role. Only top level group owners and admins have the ability to create custom roles. If you're looking for it and you can't find it, check your role. And this is on the ultimate tier only. We're going to continue on our work with customizable roles. Right now, we're wrapping up the work that allows you to we completed the work to create the custom role, to assign it in to a user in the UI. We are completing that. You can do both of those things already via the API. We have also heard from customers that I use SAML or LDAP to automatically provision my users into the system. And whenever I provision them, I want to provision them in with a custom role, not a static role. So we're working on support for automated user provisioning with customizable roles too. And every milestone, we add more and more permissions. All right, over to you, Jensen.
Awesome. Our abuse reports dashboard, this gives users the ability to view and take action on abuse as it's reported to them. So administrators can search, filter, and see a history of any previous abuse, get a screenshot of that abuse, and take whatever prescribed action, whether it be to do nothing or to ban the user within a single dashboard. So this is super helpful even for our internal teams and for users who might be susceptible to abuse, universities and such. This is a tool that we built so that you have one spot to view and manage any area where an admin might need to be alerted for abuse. We intend to expand this to insider threat as well, so that an administrator might be alerted to potentially malicious activity from an insider. We're in development for dynamic rate limits. This is the ability for us to allow a user to access our services even without having any idea of whether we should or should not trust them. So in effect, the MVC of this would be to allow new users to access our services, but in a way that doesn't allow them to disrupt legitimate services of users, so they can't overwhelm our system by signing up a ton of users and abusing the system. We intend to expand this again to insider threat to make it available so that, you know, if someone is doing something potentially malicious, you can rate limit them and slow them down.
Awesome. Thanks, Jensen, for covering those updates. I'm Grant Hickman. I'm the PM for our security policies team. And today I'll be covering highlights from both compliance and security policies. I've been supporting on compliance as acting PM, but Jensen will be picking that up in the next milestone. So I'll cover it for today. A key problem that we want to solve from the compliance standpoint is to be able to help organizations to really understand their compliance posture. So that's exactly what the standards adherence report will do. This has been recently released. We are starting with a set of checks that are considered separation of duties checks and part of our GitLab standard. So yeah, this will allow you to kind of drill down into projects and understand which ones are adhering to the GitLab standard or not. And we'll be expanding in the future on our standards adherence reporting to support new checks and new regulatory standards. Next up in development, this is something that's I would say it's a continuous area of improvement over time. We'll be adding support for more streaming destinations, as well as expanding our audit event support for instance level and top level group management, as well as expanding our filtering options. So today you can use a more generic option for HTTP destinations for pretty much any tool you want to stream events into, but we're adding more first class integration with streaming destinations. And so one thing I would highlight is recently released here is Google Cloud Logging, which is available at the instance and group levels. And then next we'll be working on adding support for AWS S3. As there are several dimensions to this effort, I've linked here our category direction page, so you can view that page and view a matrix of the different efforts that we're working on across like the various group and instance levels and which streaming destination. So you can go there for more information. Next up is it's a pretty small effort, but one that's definitely worthy of highlighting. It's in development. We are improving our external status checks to be able to time out and to be able to retry those. So if you do have an external compliance tool, for example, and there are intermittent failures or timeouts, this will reduce the burden on the developer or avoid complications when you're trying to merge code. You can just go ahead and retry the status check directly in the EMR. Next up, we're making more changes to the Compliance Center and the reporting capabilities within it. And in a way, the Compliance Center is getting a bit of a facelift. So we're elevating the settings for managing and editing compliance frameworks out of the general settings area, which is kind of like hidden today. And we're elevating that and bringing it into the Compliance Center. So the Compliance Center will become kind of a central destination for compliance teams. You'll be able to view that standards adherence report and the various violations and projects that have been there in the past, but you'll also be able to view and manage your frameworks, view more details about each framework in like a policy drawer view. And you'll also be able to go drill down into the framework, edit the framework, and manage links to things like your standards adherence reporting projects and in the future security policies as well, which will be very powerful. On the standards adherence reporting side, we did just mention that in a previous slide. This is new, but we're continuing to improve upon that. We're going to make this more robust by adding grouping, filtering, and an export option. So that's all I wanted to cover today for compliance. Let's move into security policies. Recently released, we added some granular filters for scan result policies. This will allow you to, as a compliance or security team member, really narrow down which MRs and which findings from these various scanners are most actionable. So we added a filter to filter out false positive findings, filter out findings that do not yet have a fix available, thus they're not actionable. And you can also filter out findings that are within SLA. So if they exceed SLA, you could block the MR, and these could be SLAs that you define as kind of individually in your organizations. I did also create a blog post, so if you're interested in learning more about that, or you want to go through a walkthrough, you can follow that link or search that name and look for that post. Next up in development, we are adding a new option to our scan result policies. You may in the future see scan result policies referred to as merge request approval policies. And what this will allow us to do is to support a new use case for many compliance teams, which is to ensure two-person approval on all merge requests, and also to avoid or ensure there's no way to circumvent the enforcement of these policies. So to do that, we'll be overriding various project settings like merge request and repository settings. And next, this is a very large and exciting effort that we're going to be starting into in this milestone, which is adding custom YAML support to our scan execution policies, as well as allowing you to link up your both scan execution and scan result policies up to a compliance framework. So this really opens the door up for creating custom jobs, custom scripts, and enforcing them against target development team projects, as well as better managing those policies and being able to see kind of line of sight how they roll up to individual compliance frameworks. As we do complete this effort, we'll be looking to deprecate compliance pipelines in favor of scan execution policies. The target for that ideally is going to be 17.0, and we'll definitely keep you posted as we make progress. Another effort is ensuring that we do have compliance as we roll out these custom jobs, as we're utilizing the out-of-the-box scanners. We want to ensure that any of the variables that are defined at that compliance level are at the highest precedence. So, in a way to prevent variables at a, say, group level, project level, or manual pipeline run from taking precedence and kind of circumventing the policies or the jobs that are being enforced to scan on the development team projects. This will be an effort to ensure that these compliance jobs always take precedence in the variables that they're using. We want to ensure that, especially for newly detected findings that are blocking a merge request, that they always appear as well in the security MR widget. So we're going to be working on aligning the data sources that we're using and aligning our logic to ensure that the data is similar or exactly the same when it comes to what's being displayed in the MR widget. And then outside of this effort in the next slide, there are going to be some use cases where we can't display that in the MR widget. It's not going to make sense. You might have misconfiguration issues. You might have some findings that are not on the source branch and may not be relevant in the context of the MR widget. So we're going to be working on a means to display exactly what is causing a violation, regardless of the scenario. So this is going to be an iterative process. Likely, we're going to start with an API that users can query to get more information, and then extend that to a bot comment in the MR. And in the future, we may look to include that in more clients or into maybe more of an official widget. So we'll see where that evolves. But the goal is to just help users understand if an MR is blocked, why, and be able to easily address that. And then the last slide I wanted to highlight here for security policies is the addition of custom roles for essentially managing and enforcing compliance controls. So this will span across compliance frameworks and how you create and manage those labels, as well as the links for linking security policies or scoping security policies. So we want to make sure that the appropriate users are able to manage those links so that these can't be circumvented, and that access can be minimized or restricted to those who are most appropriate. Cool. So I'll pass it on over to Alana to talk about threat insights.
Hi, I'm Alana. I am the product manager for Threat Insights. So we recently explained this vulnerability in beta. So this matures it from an experiment to beta. And I wanted to call out a few things that this includes that help relate to our story around privacy when it comes to AI. So we added the ability to preview your prompt before you actually send it to the API. You can also opt to send the prompt with or without your code as it relates to the vulnerability. And we encourage users to send the code with their prompts, so that way we can provide some more contextual information. But they do have the option to opt out if that's what they want to do. And then we also added a pre-flight check that makes sure users aren't sending sensitive data like passwords or keys to the API. I'll talk more about what's coming up next in a few slides when it comes to AI. Hannah mentioned that there is now a UI for custom permissions, and I wanted to call out the specific granular security permissions that we recently released. Those include all the ones that are listed over here on the right, and what we're trying to do here is allow users to adhere to the principle of least privilege. So security teams need different permissions than developer teams. One of those specifically is changing the vulnerability status, which we will be removing as a breaking change to the developer role, and that will come in 17.0. We also just released by default the group dependency list. So this allows users to see dependencies across all their projects within a group. This is an iterative process. And so what you see here is not final. And I did link to the designs of what we are working towards, which will include filtering, searching, but also will include the vulnerabilities that are associated with a specific component. It may seem small, but I think it's a big deal for a lot of teams who are working to quickly triage their vulnerabilities. But we recently added the ability to bulk update the status on the vulnerability report. So hoping to optimize different workflows to more quickly triage vulnerabilities. Also, something exciting is we're starting to add the ability to group on the vulnerability report. And we recently released the ability to group by status and severity. Up next, we will allow grouping by tool and by OWASP top 10. What's next? When it comes to explain this vulnerability, we are working with the AI enablement team on making sure that we set a ground truth for what is a good response from AI and what is not. It's hard to quantify that, as it is more natural language than it is a binary right and wrong answer. So we have shifted our focus to work on a proof of concept for resolve this vulnerability. So more often users aren't necessarily sure where to start, or they're not know what the solution is. So the hope here is that users can click a button on a specific SaaS vulnerability that opens a merge request with a suggestion as to how to resolve this vulnerability. So It would just be like a normal merge request that you would see with quantification that, hey, this is AI generated. It would still need to go through all the different security scans, any approval processes, so that way we're not actually adding additional vulnerabilities when we're trying to fix them. And then we do have some exciting things coming when it comes to filtering and search on the vulnerability report. The one that I want to highlight that will be coming eventually, but it is on the roadmap, is being able to search by identifier. And we are also going to add a new type of security policy that will be a vulnerability management policy. And the first ones that we are going to do is auto resolve and auto dismiss vulnerabilities that are no longer found in subsequent scans. This has come from a lot of different customers, and it will help minimize a lot of the noise that they are seeing in their vulnerability report. Last but not least, software supply chain security. Sam, I think that's you.
All right, thanks everyone. So we have our software supply chain security working group, and while it's not a formal group in GitLab, we have made some significant progress over the last 3 months. Most notably, we released support for keyless signing, which is a tight integration with cosign so that users can easily sign their build artifacts, container images, and packages with just a few simple line changes to their CI/CD file. Keyless signing has a whole host of benefits that come along with it, as far as both security and ease of use. Moving on to what's next, our team has been hard at work improving the UI for container images in the container image registry. We've been working to show a badge on the container image line item to show whether or not it's signed, and also to consolidate those signatures into that line item so that you no longer have to hunt through a huge list just to try to find the signature that's associated with that image. And that's all for our governed stage strategy review. We look forward to taking any questions that you may have in our upcoming live synchronous Q&A. Have a great day.